Hello and welcome to the latest in the Northern Slant Hosts series with me, Roger Greer. Today I'm joined by Professor of Mental Health Sciences at Ulster University and Northern Ireland's first mental health champion, Professor Siobhán O'Neill. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good morning.
And good morning, yeah, great to have you on. You were appointed NI's first mental health champion in June 2020, although you've been championing mental health in Northern Ireland for a while now. Firstly, what is the role and how have you found it?
So there's three elements to the role. The role is about working with government and advising and being that critical friend, supporting all of the different government departments and making sure that mental health is promoted within their policies. And particularly there for the Department of Health, when they're developing, at that stage they were developing the mental health strategy for the next 10 years. So that was a really important programme of work. But I'm also working with Justice on various different projects around mental health in the criminal justice system and in prisoners and in staff and all sorts of different areas there. And then with education's another example, planning the mental health in schools framework for schools so that we improve mental health provision there. So working with government, also working with the public, sending out important messages around self-care, about what they might expect from mental health services, and then also being that public advocate, collecting the views of people and their perspectives on mental health and how it's being managed, and making sure that that's then translated into action across the government departments. So it's just those two elements, really working with the population and working with the government.
So quite a wide-ranging task then. And I mean, there's been calls for a mental health champion in Northern Ireland for a few years now, and with good reason, because we do have real issues with mental ill health in Northern Ireland. You've written about the high prevalences of mental illness in Northern Ireland compared to the rest of the UK. And in Ulster University's Health, Equality and the Economy report, you touch on in your chapter transgenerational trauma as one of those issues. Is this one of the issues why, or one of the reasons why it's so high and why it remains so high in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why our rates are higher than other places. So we had a period of significant violence and trauma on the population, but we also had the effects of the legacy of the Troubles. So poverty, deprivation, money was being spent on other things and there wasn't the investment that should have happened. So it's important to really, really emphasize that inequality and poverty are key contributors to mental illness now, as they were during the time of the Troubles. But we have communities where families have been traumatized and there's been mental illness, which has meant that there were adversities for young people and children. And all of the data internationally is showing us that what happens to you in those early years and in childhood is really important for your mental health. And if there's adversities there and negative experiences there, that it can influence how you manage stress across your lifespan and the likelihood then that you'll develop mental illness. So this is about adversity in childhood particularly, and also about poverty and inequality. So that's the transgenerational transmission that we're talking about. There's some evidence of biological transmission too, but if you get in there in the first few years and certainly through primary school, you can make a huge difference to the child's risk of mental illness then in adulthood.
Absolutely. And I mean, you've started the role at a really challenging time in the middle of COVID-19. I mean, people are seeing not as much of their friends and family anymore. There's fewer chances to get out and exercise or even just to do activities, no holidays or breaks. And a lot of people have job, well-being and income worries. Is there any indication yet on the impact of COVID-19 on mental health in Northern Ireland?
Yes, there was a lot of data collected right from the very, very start. Scientists were working and designing surveys and collecting the data. So we now have strong evidence of the very high rates of anxiety at the first lockdown. And that is completely normal because we're dealing with a pandemic and a deadly virus and so much uncertainty. So rates of anxiety went way up. Luckily for most people, that was a short-term effect. And as we kind of got used to the situation and as the government put in mitigation measures to give people more certainty around their income and the economic impact, then we saw those rates decline. But there's strong evidence that there were more long-lasting effects, effects that could influence the risk of mental illness. in particular groups of the population. So we're talking a lot about young people at the minute, and we know that young people and children were adversely affected, particularly young people of primary school age. Their impacts were worse than secondary school children. Young people who lived in areas where they were deprived, where they didn't have opportunities to get outside and exercise, where they didn't have gardens, for example, they were more impacted. The digital divide saw mental health impact as well, where young people who didn't have access to technology, who couldn't talk to their friends, who couldn't participate in homeschooling to the same extent, they were more adversely impacted. Disabled young people, really strong, even decreases in the levels of happiness in that group, which is so concerning. Children with special educational needs, again, more impacted. And these are happening at critical developmental periods. And we know that this is time that you mightn't be able to get back. For a couple of weeks, maybe even months at the start, it's not so bad. But now we're into this long-term COVID thing, where it's going on maybe for more than a year. So we need to be very careful, make sure that we apply interventions right now to reduce then the long-term risk. I'm very hopeful there's lots we can do for those groups, but I think we really need to start looking at that now, because we then reap the benefits in a few years' time of things that we do right now to protect those groups. But parents who were homeschooling, again, really stressful, trying to work from home and look after children at the same time. And women were more affected than men by that. So that's very clear finding as well. Interestingly, older people were less affected than younger people. Even by loneliness, the loneliness scores are higher in those younger age groups than they were even in those older age groups. But it's really important also to emphasize that the fear of transmission, that older people who were shielding people with existing health conditions, people with those underlying conditions that we're all talking so much about and in such a negative way, that has a mental health impact there as well. And we saw trauma in our health service staff, and that's that's the reason why we need to keep the virus low, and we need to maintain these restrictions right now. And in people that were infected with the virus, 1 in 5 have reported adverse mental health consequences that would meet the criteria for mental illness. So there's a whole range of mental health impacts that come with COVID, and it's all about leadership and making sure that we suppress this virus and that we get everybody vaccinated as soon as possible so that we can get through this.
Absolutely, and you talk about how to begin to tackle those issues, and I know that the Minister's released consultation on the mental health strategy, which is coming into this year. Do you have any thoughts on that and how it's developing through?
Yeah, this was one of my first jobs, was to oversee the mental health strategy, and there's been a lot of work with people who have lived experience of mental health problems and carers. When it was really welcomed, particularly in a time of a pandemic. We had to do all of this stuff online, but I'm actually feeling really positive about the strategy. I think it's really strong. Most of the things that people have told me about, we've been able to make sure they're included in the strategy, but we need people to respond to the consultation, because when you look through that, it can sometimes feel like it's a bit of a wish list. It's aspirational. It's a collection of services. There are issues around the links between services, around the links, for example, between schools and mental health services, the links between the criminal justice system and mental health services, prevention, early intervention, all of those things. We need to work out what this is going to look like. So we're really calling on people out there, particularly people who have experience of mental health problems, who've tried to use the services and maybe had negative experiences. We want them to comment on the strategy and tell us what this needs to look like, how this should be delivered, what it should feel like for someone who is approaching their GP or somebody else with a mental health problem, looking for treatment. That's the bit now. So it's like we have this lovely strategy of what we want it to look like, but how is that going to work? How should it feel for people?
We have go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say we've got the aspirations now. We need the roadmap.
We need the roadmap. We need to know how to do it, and how to do it so that you promote recovery. that you know that you do this in a really compassionate way. You know, these are the ethoses that are supposed to be running through it. So how do we do that? How do we deliver that? What have other countries done? So this is all the stuff we're doing right now, but it's such an exciting time. I mean, this is a real opportunity, and I want everybody to have a look at this and give me their thoughts and let me know what this should look like.
Wonderful. We'll be sure to include the link in the article and the social media when we're going forward. And moving from the sort of societal how to tackle mental health to the personal, if there's individuals who are feeling stressed or particularly vulnerable, or people think that one of their family members or friends are, what sort of hints and tips, or what can we do to try to help them out? What's the best thing to advise?
I think it's really important to work out where you are in this sort of a continuum, you know. So on the one hand, you've got really well, doing okay, and then you're starting to get stressed, and stress in and of itself isn't a problem, but you need to be able to cope with the stress that you have. So it's about identifying, is this stress, or, you know, how far along the continuum are you, or is this maybe getting towards the point where somebody might be developing a mental health problem? So if it's long-lasting symptoms of anxiety, really not being able to sleep or eat, feeling constantly on high alert, that's been going on for a few weeks, then it's time to talk to a GP to try and get some treatment for that. You know, whenever these symptoms start to happen, there's a lot you can do to look after yourself and to take care of yourself. And I would be promoting the 5 steps to well-being there. So even distracting yourself, finding something to connect with other people, trying to be grateful and take notice of the good things, learn. You know, it's all about emotional regulation, getting away from that stressed state and being able to physically function, and physical activity, exercise is really important there. But if all of those things aren't working, or you feel that this is just, you know, you can't control it, then the doctors and the mental health providers want us to be coming to them and saying that I'm struggling here, I need a bit of help. There's techniques you can use, there's early interventions in place. A lot of GP practices have mental health practitioners on site that will be able to talk to you about that and help get you then, if you have, you know, if you're showing signs of depression or chronic anxiety, then there's treatments that you can have as well. And we talk a lot about waiting lists, but some of those services actually don't have waiting lists, you know, so it's important to ask for help. Don't ever assume that there's nothing there for you, and don't ever feel embarrassed about this stuff, because, you know, we're all going through a pandemic. We need to be super kind to ourselves. This is a scary time, so, you know, this is a sign our bodies are actually working well. We know, we understand the threat. So get help and try, because, you know, we're parents, we're leaders, we're workers, we have to problem solve. We have a lot of challenges right now. We need to be in the right state to do that. If you're in a state of stress, you're anticipating the animal behind you. You know, it's not a good place to make decisions, to work, you know, to get us through this.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what we would be chatting about today in the interview, and speaking about mental health as individuals is one of those really important pieces that's always going to be high on that list. And I sort of recognised a slight hypocrisy in myself whenever I was thinking about that, because I've run mental health conferences in government level for ministers and high policy officials. I think you've spoken at one that I've ran in Belfast, so one in Dublin, Wales, and Edinburgh. So I've spoken about mental health to a wide range of people. I've been on the spot the signs courses for sports teams and in the office, but probably I've only spoken to one person honestly about my own mental health and my whole life, and that I'm probably not the only one that's done that. And it made me think about a couple of surveys which I saw a few years ago whenever I lived in Northern Ireland. It was about Mid-Ulster where I lived, and it was I think noted as the happiest place in the UK. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, another survey came out, and it's one of the places in the UK with the highest antidepressant prescriptions. And it seemed to, it obviously they interview different people. There's different cohorts that go into those surveys, but it seemed to reflect that that singularly Northern Irish trait of, how you doing? Fine, no matter what. And it seems that it's a society we're better at speaking about mental health, but possibly as individuals we're not. And how do we crack that nut?
Yeah, this is something that I reflect on a lot. I think it's really important to, again, see it as a continuum. So one hand, we've got stress, you know, and I talk very openly about the stress and pressure of this job, but then how I cope with that as well, you know. And I got divorced, what, 12 years ago, and I went through a period of depression then. It was really difficult, and that was a very real illness, you know. I wasn't able to function. So it's so important that we talk about the pressure that we're under, and we all can talk about that, because we're all through it, every single one of us. Somebody tells you that they don't have stress, then you know, they're not doing anything. They don't have challenges. So this is something that's it's a common experience. It's part of being human, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength when we can speak. It's a sign that we have insight, self-awareness, you know. Yeah. And that's what we want. We want that of our leaders. We want leaders who can understand when they need help, when to ask for support, when to say, actually, I need a bit of help here. That's exactly what we need. So I think we should all learn to talk and communicate. If you look at what they're doing with toddlers and kids, you know, and I have a 3.5-year-old, you know, and they talk about their feelings in playgroup and how they manage their feelings. I think that's just so wonderful. And that's the start of it. You know, that's what it's about. It's about acknowledging we're all humans. We have feelings. If our bodies and brains are working properly, we have feelings, and it's about how we address those and how we cope with the pressure and stress of our lives. Such a powerful, important thing. And there's also this stigma of mental illness, though. I think we're at the point where we're allowed to say we're not okay and stressed. You know, a lot of us feel it's okay. But when it comes to severe mental illnesses, we don't talk so much about that. We don't talk about those who have the psychosis, you know, schizophrenia. Addiction is a mental illness that we find very difficult to talk about. A lot of us use substances to manage our stress. And we can get trapped, particularly in the time of a pandemic, we can get trapped in a wee cycle there where we're using alcohol or other drugs, you know, to cope. And we don't talk about that so much. So I think we need to have that conversation. So we're getting some of it right, but those are the things we need to talk about a wee bit more, I think. You know, but it's going to be slow, and hopefully I'll be able to promote that public conversation in this role too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's about reaching those groups that are hard to reach, and you mentioned chatting to young people and tackling that at an early stage. One of the great things that the great examples of communicating about mental health, which I saw recently, was the podcast Mind Your Bop. It's Robbie Butler, the Ulster University MLA, hosts it, and it seemed to be like quite a clear, honest, accessible way to talk about mental health, and probably reaches those people who it needs to reach, you know, young people and young men. And it's a clear message of Mind Your Bop. And I mean, sometimes I feel like I trip myself up over mental health and the use of language of mental health to try to, you know, to be sensitive about all the issues. But something just like Mind Your Bop, it's a really clear thing. Do we need more of that just to cut through and to get to those people who are hard to reach?
Yeah, I think Mind Your Bop's fantastic, and it's just good fun as well, because it's about acknowledging that we all struggle, you know. And actually it is quite funny, the things we do when we're under stress and pressure can be quite amusing at times as well, you know. So I did a couple of sessions, and they're just great at talking about how this modern world that we live in, you know, we're sometimes ill-equipped to deal with the stuff that we're up against, you know, and it is amusing, and it's about just acknowledging that it's a common experience, you know. I really, you know what, I worry most about people who say they're doing really well, there's no problem here, nothing to see here, I am coping so well, you know. When we hear this around discussions about exams, for example, and children, where parents will go, my child wants to do this, they're so keen, they're so motivated, this is not a source of stress, and you just kind of really wonder because it is stressful. Life is stressful, you know. We gotta be able to talk about this stuff. So Mind Your Bop's great. I worry about, you know, I used to use words like this is madness, or, you know, you gotta be so careful when you call something crazy as well. There's a stigma there, you know. I would have used the term bananas, and then somebody said the other day, that's unfair to bananas. So you gotta be well careful, and I trip up all the time, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is we are talking about it. We're getting there, you know.
Absolutely. And it's been great to talk to you today, Siobhán. I really, really appreciate you take the time out to to chat to us. The role of mental health champions probably now as important as it's been over the last 10 years with what we're all going through. So thank you very much for carrying out that work. I'll give you the last word. Do you want to go through those the 5 steps to wellness again before we close?
I will indeed, if I remember them all. The first one's connect safely with people every single day. Just send a message to that, schedule it in. And it's also, that's a way of giving, and give is one of them as well. So try and give back, do something good for other people. That'll make you feel good about yourself. And that really, really works. Take notice. Now, this is not about mindfulness or meditation. It can be just about trying to enjoy what the good things are in your life, and noticing things, and getting engrossed in a book or a movie or a football match or something like that. See, that stay active is a really important one as well. Just get outside every day. Just shift, move your body, because you're getting away from those stress hormones. You're telling your body everything's all right. I fought this animal, I can do this. So those are, I think, all 5 of them. Yeah.
Wonderful. As someone who ran every day in the first lockdown and has put on a stone in the second lockdown, I can attest to the get active.
Can I just say, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, self-compassion, especially if you've got a New Year's resolution. Listen to the Happiness Lab podcast. They do all the science stuff around well-being. So self-kindness, self-awareness, absolutely, that comes first before all of the others. Just be very, very gentle. We're all going through something right now, and we'll be all right. We will get through it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much again. Great to speak to you today.
Take care, Roger.